Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's class. My name is Carrie. I am City Market's Assistant Outreach and Education Manager, the one who's been sending you all the emails about timing and all that, so now you can put a face to a name. Super excited to have you here for class tonight. We're really proud to be able to still continue our virtual programming, even as we move back into in-person programming here in Burlington, Vermont. So thanks so much for joining us. If you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to know where you're joining us from. So if you want to type into the chat box, the little question and answer box, where you're watching from, that would be awesome. If you're joining us a little bit late, it's going to make you watch from the beginning, but if you'd rather catch up to where we are, you can always hit the little live button down near the bottom. It's right by the play pause, and that'll catch you up to where we are rather than making you start with all the intro stuff. If at any time during class you have questions, feel free to type them into that question and answer box. This is the only time you'll see me on screen. Otherwise, I'll be behind the scenes, seeing all those questions as they come in and feeding them to our instructor. So you'll hear my voice asking those questions as they come in. So feel free to type them in at any point if you have questions. I'll send a survey out tomorrow. Would love to know your thoughts on the class, other ideas for virtual classes that you'd like to see from us throughout the year. And I think other than that, I am all set. So I will turn things over to our instructor, Maria. Maria, take it away.
Hi, and thank you for joining us for this cooking class. My name is Maria Garrido. I'm a chef instructor, and tonight I'm going to be sharing with you a recipe called Pancit, which is a Filipino noodle stir-fry dish. I'm going to do this as a demonstration, but I don't know if anyone's cooking along. Hopefully, some of you are trying it. But I'm just going to go through all the steps. And you'll see how long it takes to make the dish. Pancit is a very popular dish in the Philippines. It's very common to see at family gatherings and holidays, but also it's a really easy dish to pull together on a weeknight. So as long as you have all the ingredients on hand. There's a variety of different kinds of pancit, and most of it has to do with what type of noodle you use. You can use rice noodles, egg noodles, wheat-based noodles. Tonight we're going to be using bean spreads, which are clear or also called glass noodles that are made from mung beans. And if you got a copy of the handout, I list the other types of noodles, and you can adapt this recipe to use those other kind of noodles. The prep for the rice noodles is the same as the mung bean noodles, but for the wheat and the egg noodles, you might want to cook those ahead of time and then add them at the end, just because they take a little longer to cook than the rice or the mung bean noodles. And we're going to be doing this with chicken. But it's really easy to adapt this to other proteins if you want to use pork or shrimp. It's also very easy to adapt this to be vegetarian. You can use any kind of vegetarian protein that you prefer. I prefer, when I do this vegetarian, I prefer to use firm tofu that's been pressed a little bit. And then you can just add it to your stir fry like you normally would add to a stir fry. And I'll mention that when we get to that point. See, any notes? Nope, I think that's all my little notes. So the first thing you need to do when you're making pancit from these glass noodles is to soak the noodles. These are, I don't know if you can see the label, but they're Kimbo brand, made in Taiwan, mung bean noodles. If you go to an Asian grocery store, you'll see a variety of different mung bean noodles. Some of them are going to be very, very long. Some of them are going to be shorter. Several of them come in these rolled up little packs so that you can kind of guess how much you're going to use. Usually for a family-sized dinner, I use about 3 of these. So first thing you want to do is soak these in room temperature water. And you do that at the beginning because then by the time you're ready to use them, they're all ready to go. The other thing soaking, which I went ahead and put in water ahead of time, are some shiitake mushrooms. In the recipe that was mailed to you, it says woodier mushrooms, but I wasn't able to get those. So I'm just using shiitake, dried shiitake mushrooms. And you soak those in warm water, usually for about 10 minutes, and then drain them and save the water that you soak them in, because we can use that as broth at the end. First thing I'm going to do is slice the onion.
So as a quick reminder, if you're joining us a little bit late, because I see a few other people have logged on, you're able to hit live down near the bottom. It's by the play pause button. That will catch you up to where we are, and then you can always put questions during class into the Q&A box. And I've made a little announcement in there so you can see where that pops up. Thank you.
So the nice thing about doing stir fries is that once you get everything prepped, it cooks really quickly. In this case, we're doing a noodle dish, so we want to make sure that all of our vegetables are cut in thin slices so that they can cook, and they can cook quickly and they can mix very well with the noodles. So I'm just going to julienne or slice this noodle. I cut it in half, and then I'm going to cut slices on the side here. I'm using about half of a medium-sized onion here. I realize it's white, so it's kind of hard to see on the cutting board. But I just cut, so you just cut slices on the onion so that they're easy to mix with the noodles once they're cooked. And again, I used about a medium onion, so about a half of a medium onion.
To the person who asked the question in the chat, yes, as of right now, the plan is to keep offering 1 or 2 virtual classes a month, even as we go back to mainly in-person classes. So this is our one for August. We might try to do 1 or 2 in September as well. But yeah, keep an eye out for more of our virtual programming options.
I'm just smashing garlic cloves. So I'm going to mince the garlic. Got these really beautiful, nice, big cloves.
Yeah, that's the first of the local garlic. I forget which farm it is, but yeah, it's the local farm, which is pretty exciting for this early. I guess it's last season's harvest. It's been curing, but
bigger garlic cloves don't necessarily make them any easier to peel. The other nice thing about pancit is that it is a full meal. It's kind of a one-pot dish. It does involve a fair amount of vegetable prep, but you can make shortcuts. You can use prepared vegetables. You can use a food processor to kind of speed that up, depending on what you have available to you.
And this is a recipe that works well with substitutions as well. Like, could you add other vegetables that aren't on the list?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. You can add other vegetables that aren't on this list. You can substitute. So for example, we're going to be using, looks like Napa cabbage, but I've also used bok choy and Chinese long beans and just regular green cabbage. Mm-hmm. So you can, it's essentially a vegetable stir fry. So any vegetables that you think you can stir fry, they would go great with this.
And like the example with the mushrooms too, the woodiers might be hard to find for some people. So we just use some dried shiitakes, which you can find at almost any grocery store. Right. Would you ever use fresh mushrooms, or would you always go with the dried?
You can use fresh mushrooms. Fresh mushrooms give off a little bit more water when you cook them. So you might just need to cook them a little longer. At the end part of this recipe, when we put the noodles in, the noodles absorb whatever's water is in the pot. So you might have a little bit extra water from the fresh mushrooms, but it's not that bad. So we've got about a tablespoon or so of chopped garlic. And we're going to do about a tablespoon of chopped ginger. So you can peel the outer skin off the ginger. You can do this with a regular vegetable peeler, or sometimes I use a spoon because the skin comes off pretty easily.
Chef Maria teaches a lot of classes with us here at City Market. I think back in April, you did your lumpia demo.
Yes.
The sort of egg roll type wrapped ones. And that's when everyone was asking for your pancit recipe when you talked about it. So I decided to ask you if you'd want to demo that one for everybody. Still working on getting that video up on the website, but we'll get it up there eventually.
Yeah, so the egg rolls and pancit are very popular foods for holidays in the Filipino household and gatherings. We had them all the time on holidays, and when we would go to the beach for picnics, we make big batches of pancit and lots of egg rolls. So with the ginger, just a tip for you, you'll notice that the fibers are running in a particular direction. So when you want to cut, you want to slice the ginger against those, perpendicular to that direction. So that way you don't end up with those long strings of ginger in your teeth. So you want to cut perpendicular to those fibers, whichever way they're running. And that shortens them so that when you go to chop the ginger, you end up with little diced pieces rather than strings.
Could you also grate it if you want it even smaller?
You could also grate it. You could also, grating it tends to release a lot of the juice that's in it, so you want to make sure you save that and throw it in your stir fry. You could also do it in a mini food processor. With the ginger and the garlic, you just want them to be small enough pieces so they can be mixed in with the vegetable stir fry.
It already smells good in this kitchen, and all you've done is chop ginger and garlic, but it's always a good start.
Ginger, garlic, and onions make your kitchen smell really good. And you can go ahead and put that ginger in with your garlic, because that's all going to go in the dish at the same time. Then I'm going to slice a bell pepper. I'm using a red bell pepper. It's nice color to put into the dish. It's also, I think, has a milder flavor than a green pepper. You could also use jalapeno peppers depending on your heat tolerance. And again, you're just going to slice these into strips. So one medium bell pepper should be enough for this serving. I'm making a serving about, probably for a serving of 4, average dinner size.
Anybody have any questions at this stage of our demo that you want to put into the Q&A box? Happy to pass those along to Chef Maria.
Is anyone cooking along?
Yeah, that's the other question. I always publish these as demos so that we don't lose people if they think it's a cook along. But if you're trying to cook along, let us know how it's going, or if you're going to make it, later in the week when it's not Monday.
So we have 1 carrot. You want to cut the carrot again in strips so that they will mix nicely with the noodles. There's a number of different ways you can do this. You can, of course, use a grater on a food processor. You can cut them by hand. You have a really good knife. Want to cut off a side so that it will stop rolling, and then cut strips out of that piece of carrot. And then when you stack those up on its side, you can then slice down and cut strips of carrot that way.
Zoomed in the camera, I'll zoom in a little bit. There we go.
Yeah.
Zoom in on you a little bit.
So you get matchsticks, which will cook a little faster, and again, they'll mix nicely with the noodles. The other tool I've used in the past is called a julienne peeler, which allows you to just peel the carrot into little strips. It kind of looks like this. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep, we're zoomed in pretty far.
It's got teeth on it, so that when you drag it across the carrot, you end up with little strips. It tends to work better with the bigger carrots than the little ones, so that's why I didn't use it here. Oh. So we have our carrots. And another ingredient would be the beans. And in the recipe, I recommended either green beans or snow peas. We're going to use green beans tonight. But if you have snow peas, you don't really have to do anything to them other than blanch them. You want to blanch them in heavily salted water, boiling water, for about no more than 45 seconds to a minute, depending on how many you have. And then immediately take them out of the boiling water and put them in ice water. That helps to, that's what we did with these green beans. And it helps to preserve the color and the freshness of the green vegetables, rather than cooking them raw right into the pan, which tends to wilt and change the color a lot. So I'm just going to cut these so they're a little shorter because they're already long. They'll mix very well with the noodles, but I'm just going to cut them in half here so they'll stir fry a little easier. And then
the giant child of the Napa cabbage.
Then we need to slice some cabbage, and we were only able to find this giant cabbage. So I'm going to take a couple of leaves from the outside.
We grow big cabbages in Vermont.
And use it. Is this local?
Yeah.
Wow, local. 'Tis the season. You can use Napa cabbage. You can use regular cabbage. You can use bok choy, baby bok choy. All of those work as a green vegetable.
Somebody asks, would you also cut the snow peas in half if you were doing that instead of green beans?
No, I wouldn't cut the snow peas. The snow peas mix very well with the noodles in their shape.
Great.
So, oops.
And then I guess if you were doing bok choy, would you keep the stems and the leaves as separate vegetables because the stems would need longer, or would you just toss it all in at once?
I've done it both ways, but I tend to put the cabbage in last, and I like the firmness of the stem. So I guess depending on the type of bok choy, whether you have baby bok choy, or I usually use baby bok choy, and baby bok choy you can slice and just put the whole thing in at the same time.
I did look for a smaller cabbage, and that was the smallest.
Okay, so we have cabbage.
So far, we have people watching from Oregon and California who have chimed in. So welcome, West Coasters.
Welcome, West Coasters. Okay, I think that's all the vegetables.
This really is a mise en place heavy dish. Everything's got to go on place.
So for the meat for this dish, we're going to use chicken thighs. I prefer to use chicken thighs to chicken breasts because chicken breasts can dry out very quickly. It's not, we're not marinating this. So, we're just gonna stir fry it right away. So again, you want to cut it in strips that will mix nicely with the noodles. The main flavorings in this dish are soy sauce and what we call patis or fish sauce. You might be familiar with fish sauce from other cuisines like Thai and Vietnamese. So of course you don't need to add salt to this dish at any point. We're going to be using a little sesame oil as well as a flavoring.
I think the recipe calls for 2 chicken thighs, but I just got a pack of 4 because that's what they came in. I don't know. Would you like, are you trying for a balance of sort of half and half meat, veg to noodles? Like what in Pancit, what's the normal, I guess, ratio?
I kind of like to do, I wouldn't say it's half and half,
Okay.
Maybe a little bit more protein.
Mm-hmm.
I can, these are smaller than the ones that I use.
Yeah.
So, so we have the chicken strips, again, chicken thighs cut into just little strips.
I can come get that cutting board and knife out of the way.
And I'm just going to wash my hands really quick. And the last thing we'll be doing at the end, we'll be squeezing some lime juice on top. So traditionally, we use a citrus fruit called calamansi, which is difficult to get here in the United States. You can get the juice, but it's hard to find the actual fruit. And it's a fruit that's about that big, and it looks like it's an orange, but it tastes more like a lime. It's a very, very strong lime taste.
I think we talked about it a little bit earlier when you came in and we were just chatting, but where do you shop for most of your ingredients if you're in the Burlington area? I know of the people who have told us where they're watching from, they're not in the Burlington area, but if you're in our area, where would you go to shop for some of this stuff?
Locally, I would go to Thai Fat, which is on North Avenue, and Everest Market out in Essex. They tend to have a really good selection of noodles and a variety of different Asian vegetables to choose from. Like I said, you can combine or substitute other vegetables. You can use Chinese long beans, you can use water lettuce, you can use regular cabbage or bok choy. All depends on what you have available to you. So I just put in a little vegetable oil and some sesame oil. And I'm going to cook the chicken.
Grab me this. Now it really smells good in here because we've got the sesame oil going. A strong flavor, but I love it.
We're just going to cook the chicken for a little bit. And then we'll do the vegetables and then throw the chicken back in. And normally I use a wok to do this, but it's kind of hard for you to see in a wok. So we decided we'll use this frying pan. It works just fine in a frying pan. My aunt tends to cook it in a very large, she tends to make very large batches. She cooks it in a very large, like a Dutch oven almost. So you don't have to have it in a wok if you don't have a wok available. I'm going to add a little bit of soy sauce to the chicken to flavor it, about a tablespoon. If you use mung bean noodles or rice noodles and gluten-free soy sauce, then it is also a gluten-free meal. Not sure if that's what we're using.
I think so, yeah.
I think we're using
Tamari.
gluten-free soy sauce. So.
And I know we've talked about it before, I think when we were doing the lumpia class, that there is a vegetarian fish sauce alternative out there somewhere. We're going to be using the real stuff tonight because obviously we already have chicken in the dish, so it's not vegetarian. But if you're trying to go truly vegetarian, you can look for a vegetarian fish sauce. Or just more soy sauce, right? If you're not really a fish sauce fan anyway, you could just up the soy sauce.
Oh, almost ready. Oh, there's one ingredient I forgot to chop. Forgot to chop the mushrooms. So I'm using shiitake mushrooms. So I'm just gonna slice them to add into the stir fry. And as we discussed earlier, you could use fresh mushrooms, dried mushrooms. The recipe calls for wood ear mushrooms. But I wasn't able to find those locally, so we're using shiitakes tonight. Oh, let's let that pan heat up a little bit again. Put a little bit more oil in. Again, I'm using vegetable oil and toasted sesame oil. You don't want to use sesame oil straight up on its own. It's got a very low smoke point. So on its own, it'll just start to smoke and burn. So first we're going to add in onions.
This is when I wish that we had the technology to let people smell through their computers. So I want to be like, oh, it smells so good in here right now, and that feels me, and nobody else is able to smell it.
We want to cook the onions until they're soft. They don't have to be caramelized or anything. They just need to be softened. And I stir them around a lot so that they don't burn. Although I don't think that's going to be a problem with this pan. And then next I like to add in the carrots, so because they're pretty hard as a vegetable, so I want them to cook a little longer. So yes, as a Filipino feast, this would be served with lumpia, which are the Filipino egg rolls, with lots of rice. Maybe also a beef dish called beefsteak, which is a grilled beef with a vinegar sauce to it. Those are very popular when we would have picnics or outside parties, because they would do the beefsteak on the grill. And it smells so good.
Chef Maria is teaching another class actually outdoors with people with us a little bit later this month, and we're going to do some like street food almost, right? Like a marinated chicken and a marinated pork.
Yep, we're doing a Filipino street food class out at the Intervale later in the month, and that's going to be Filipino barbecue chicken and pork skewers.
With banana ketchup, which I think is so cool.
With banana ketchup, right. Okay, now I'm going to add the onion and the ginger and the garlic. I add this in a little later just because I don't want it to burn. If it goes in as the first thing in the pan. And I'm adding the red peppers. This does take a little while longer as a stir fry when you do it in a flat pan. Of course, we wanted you to be able to see it. So we made that little adjustment. But in a wok, because of the shape of the vessel, the heat gets concentrated, so it takes less time. And it's easier to toss the vegetables in a wok.
Yeah, when I brought the wok onto the camera, it kind of blocked like 2/3 of what was in the wok, so I figured that wouldn't make very good television.
Yeah, it's hard to see, unless you have one of those mirrors or cameras above.
It's on my wish list. We're still doing virtual classes for a while. I'm hoping to get an overhead camera.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
So once the vegetables start getting a little soft, that's when I add soy sauce and the fish sauce. And the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of soy sauce and 1 tablespoon of fish sauce, which sounds like a lot. You can use low sodium soy sauce, or you can use a little bit less and taste it and see if you want a little bit more. But soy sauce and fish sauce are both very salty, and they're the only seasoning in this dish. So you don't have to add salt after you cook it. And the same with fish sauce. You can start with a little bit and then taste it and see if you want to add a little bit more. Now I'm going to add the cabbage. And the mushrooms. And the green beans.
I love the smell of fish sauce. It just started to hit me over here, back where I am behind the camera, and it smells delicious.
I use 2 utensils because I don't want to fling all the cabbage out onto the counter. So let me get that, let that get up to temperature again.
Somebody asked if the scallions in the ingredient list just get sprinkled on top, or do they also get stir fried? It's not.
They don't get stir fried, they get sprinkled on top at the end, yeah. Are these local?
Yeah. We have, it's kind of that great season in Vermont where everything's local.
It's the time of year when everything's local, so we have local scallions.
I think those might be Pitchfork Farm.
Nice.
Down. So we have a bunch of people watching. I'm curious if anybody is planning to make this, or if anybody's cooking along with us right now, or what sort of additions or substitutions you're going to try if you make it. I'd love to just start some chat in the Q&A box if you'd like to. That's the one part I miss about virtual, is it's great to be able to answer questions, but there's less of that sort of just natural flow of chatter. If anybody has any ideas or is going to try this later this week, let us know. Probably try it again myself later this week because that Napa cabbage is huge. And
yeah. You have to do something with that cabbage.
Yep. Might try it with, I think, pork tenderloin. Pork tenderloin and Napa, I think, would be a good combo.
I think pork tenderloin and Napa would be good. I usually use pork shoulder or pork. I usually use a fatty cut of pork, but pork tenderloin is fine. You just have to adjust the timing. Obviously, if you were using this with chicken breast, it would cook faster than chicken thighs. If you're using it with, if you want to add shrimp, you would add them at the end because they don't take very long to cook. So it's easy to adjust the protein. You just need to adjust the timing and how long you need to cook it.
If you were doing like the firm tofu, like you suggested, do you saute that with soy sauce and all that, like you do the chicken, or do you add at the end? Okay.
Yeah. Tofu, you can usually just do it the same way you would do chicken. The firm tofu. So, okay. Next, I'm going to add the chicken that I cooked earlier. And about half a cup of water. You could also use chicken broth, or the mushroom. If you were soaking dried mushrooms, you can use that as well. Stir this in, make sure it gets. Let's get it up to temperature. This is an electric burner, so it takes a little bit longer than a gas burner does to get it back up to heat. I've also done this using galangal instead of regular ginger. Galangal is an Asian cousin of ginger. It's a little bit stronger flavor, but it's good. It tastes good in the dish.
People like spicier foods, and like you mentioned, doing the jalapenos. Is there other things? Like, would you add any sort of chili paste or anything to this, or?
I've never added chili paste to this, but usually in Filipino cooking, a big part of Filipino cooking is also condiments. So there's a condiment that is vinegar and chopped dried chili peppers, and that's often sprinkled on top. So if you want to add more heat to it, you can add chili paste. You can add a different kind of pepper instead of a jalapeno pepper, if you like to have heat. I also have eaten it just with sambal or sriracha on top. Depends on how much heat you like. Okay, so once the water is coming back up to boil, we drain these noodles. Now, I should show you. These noodles, I drained the package, and that's how long these noodles are. So they're maybe a little bit longer than spaghetti noodles. Some of the packages, they're much longer. So once you drain them, you might want to check, because you might want to take a pair of scissors and cut them, just because otherwise you'll end up with noodles that are about the length of this work table. And just be aware that it doesn't really affect the taste, but it might make it easier to eat. So once the water is back up to boiling, you put the noodles in.
Just picturing trying to slurp a bite, and it just keeps going and going.
It just keeps going and going and going. So now you want to just mix the noodles in with the vegetables, coating it with the sauce and letting it absorb the liquid. This is another part where a wok might have been a little easier, but at least you can see. So you want to cook this until the liquid is absorbed. I'm going to taste it really quick to make sure that I've got enough soy sauce in it. And you can add a little bit more water if necessary to make sure that the noodles get completely absorbed. And the recipe that as written, the one you were sent, it works exactly the same with rice noodles. You soak the noodles and then you add them in at the end. With wheat or egg noodles, you would cook them ahead of time and then add them in at the end.
And if you're using those wheat or those egg, are they cooked to al dente, or is it traditionally cooked a little bit softer before adding?
The egg noodles and the Chinese wheat noodles do tend to be cooked a little bit softer. They don't quite turn out al dente the same way that Italian pasta does. But you don't want to overcook them because you're still going to cook them a little bit when you put them in this and put them in with the vegetables.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to finish up the cooking and then show you the plating. Now is the perfect time to get any last questions in. So Chef Maria will be happy to talk about any questions about this dish, any other questions about Filipino food, but if you want to go ahead and type those questions in. We are drawing towards the end of our demo today, once we plate up and show you how that looks, and I get to eat dinner. I mean, we both get to eat dinner. So any questions can get put into that Q&A box, and we'd be happy to chat about it.
Okay, I think that's.
It smells amazing. I'm so excited.
Can you see this on the?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
I will zoom in just a little bit to get your picture of the plate, but yes, we can see.
I do find that in the event that there are leftovers, the glass noodles hold up better than the rice noodles.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't affect the taste at all. It's just the rice noodles tend to break into small pieces when they're refrigerated. So. You would sprinkle your green onions. And then twist your lime juice. Top.
Fantastic.
And there you go.
Beautiful. Someone just says, looks great, can't wait to make it. So it sounds like someone's got plans to make it. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I'll leave the chat box open for just a few minutes in case anybody is frantically typing their last minute questions. I know it takes a while to get it in there, especially if you're watching on your phone and having to use that tiny little keyboard. But yeah, thank you all so much for attending tonight. Again, it's so great to be able to offer these classes to such a worldwide, sometimes, audience outside of Little Burlington, Vermont. So really excited to have you all join us. If you do end up making it, I would love to see photos. You all have my email, as I've been emailing you sort of the class link and that sort of thing. So if you make it, send me a photo and I'll pass it on to Chef Maria as well. We'd love to see it. But otherwise, I will send a survey out tomorrow, and thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings, days, whatever time it is where you're watching. But I will leave it up for another minute or two and then end the event and say goodnight. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Enjoy.